Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents These Thin Lines by Milena Mckay, narrated by Abby Craden. When you light a candle, you also cast a shadow. Ursula K. Le Guin. Part 1. Candle. 1. Once upon a fairy tale. Vi Courtenay's life was a fairy tale. That is, if fairy tales had a distant and withholding father, and a disinterested and occasionally cruel stepmother, as well as two ignorant and dismissive stepsisters. So, a fairy tale. Except unlike most main characters of every such story, Geneviève wasn't perfect. In fact, she was pretty terrible at, those fabled things that endeared heroines to the readers. You name it, and it was fairly guaranteed that she'd been told she was bad at it. Daughter? Yep, her dad stated every day how completely useless she was. So perhaps he had reasons to be so distant with her. Stepdaughter? Her stepmother reminded her of her ungratefulness on a regular basis. That is, when she could be bothered to notice her at all and wasn't slugging down expensive wine at other people's fancy parties. And why would she notice Geneviève anyway? There was nothing remarkable about her. Sister? Well, Gigi and Kylie probably would have agreed with all the statements above, but they mostly ignored her. Unless she could do something for them. Then her stepsisters snapped their fingers at her. Still, Vi, she was known to her very few friends, did something very well. So well, in fact, that she, on occasion, wished she wasn't quite as good at it. Because if she were bad at this one thing, maybe she would have shown her stuck-up, blue-blooded touch of royalty relatives the finger and walked away. Vi loved deeply, and very well indeed. She was loyal and headstrong in the intensity of her love. Her love for her ungrateful, demanding family, for those few friends she'd collected and lost over the years, and now, seemingly, for the one woman she had no business having any kind of feelings for. Because that woman was somebody's wife, and therefore so off-limits, she might as well not be on planet Earth. Vi's heart, however, hadn't gotten the memo. Not only was its desire out of bounds, the woman was also out of Vi's league. Hell, Vi's heart's desire was out of pretty much everyone's league, including her own wife's. Vi always felt particularly bitter when her mind wandered in that direction, but there was no helping these notions. And no, her thoughts weren't particularly covetous either. Vi did not want the woman for herself. She was too everything. Vi's heart would simply explode in that absolutely impossible scenario. But while she yearned and pined like any of the Bronte sisters' characters, she also resented the fact that the object of all her longing was living in a complete, in Vi's opinion, marital mismatch. Simply put, Chiara Conti Lilienfeld was too good for the likes of Frankie Lilienfeld. It didn't matter that Frankie was one of the greatest couturiers of her generation. It didn't matter that the Lillian House of Fashion was one of the most progressive and famous brands in the whole world. It didn't even matter that Frankie was suave and smooth and charming, and very handsome. In Vi's naive 25-year-old eyes, nobody was good enough for Chiara. The fact that Frankie was also Vi's boss somehow hadn't registered until after Vi had realized she had fallen smack in, first lust, then gradually in love with a former supermodel. And once Vi had cottoned onto it, honestly, it was by far the least of her worries. Vi Courtenay was raised to keep bigger secrets, after all, and keep those secrets she did. To her credit, Vi had realized she was in trouble the moment said trouble was upon her. Even years later, when asked when she'd known Chiara Conti was the one, she'd say it happened on a day that was rather momentous to begin with. To her overwhelming astonishment, after denying her the chance to actually work for a living her entire life, "We are the Courtenays. Other people work. We live." Her father had not only found her this shiny new opportunity, but also encouraged her in his own laconic way that it was High time you made something of yourself. All that studying does a woman no good." She remembered how last night he'd placed a delicate china teacup on its saucer, gave her a passing look before unfolding Le Figaro with a throwaway, "Please try to do well. And maybe don't screw it up. For once, Geneviève. Just this one time." She could still hear his scornful words ringing in her ears, although she chose to believe it was the croissant he'd been too busy chewing that had stopped him from properly wishing her luck. Vi decided to overlook the previous day's derision as she stood motionless in front of the classic Parisian four-story townhouse on Rue Saint-Honoré. The early morning light played off the gleaming windows, winking at her, promising something, luring her in like the beam of a lighthouse. She shook her head at her vision and her own silliness. Hadn't her father repeatedly told her to quit daydreaming and stop making things up? It was time to focus on the task at hand and on the place in front of her. A place that looked very much like the facades of all the other buildings in the vicinity. After all, she was surrounded by Lucci, Dior and Longchamp, and YSL. There were other fashion houses whose names Vi could not remember to save her life. Fashion was not her thing, not even a little. And neither were the massive luxury hotels this part of town was so famous for. On her way to Lillian House, she passed by the Crillon, and the doorman gave her the "move along, you don't belong here" look, which, to be fair, was kind of true. Vi didn't belong at the most luxurious hotel in the world. Not anymore. The majestic Crillon and the stately Ritz a bit farther down the street, and the Mandarin Oriental, also nestled along her walk to Rue Saint-Honoré, captured Vi's imagination with their masonry and the play of glass and light on their facades. Her hands itched for her beat-up camera before she shook herself. She had nothing to offer any of these stone giants, and they were not establishments that Vi Courtenay could afford to even set foot in. Sure, her father and Gwyneth and Gigi and Kylie frequented the parties thrown at these places, playing at being rich and famous and trading on their name, but they couldn't afford to stay here either. Nobody knew that, of course, but Vi was aware the other shoe could drop any minute, and the bursting of their fake bubble of veneered wealth with ugly debts, unpaid favors, and bounced checks was imminent. The hotels, beyond their majestic beauty, didn't interest her anyway. Neither did the other fashion houses and their luxurious stores. No, this particular building was why she'd made the long trek to the first arrondissement. This one had a certain je ne sais quoi. Her breathing shallowed. There was a stirring in her chest that made her slightly lightheaded, and with it, a premonition arose of something coming, an event, an occurrence that would change everything. A line was about to be crossed. She felt like the second she stepped over the threshold, magic would happen. And happen it did. Magic, or something like it. And much more of that something than Vi had ever intended. But that also was par for the course for her. Vi's family didn't call her clumsy on a daily basis for nothing. She had come by that adjective honestly. In her awe of the place she was finding herself in, Vi knocked, the beautiful lily-shaped knocker heavy and cold in her fingers. And as the door opened, she did what was so in character for her that she didn't even find it ironic. She stumbled over her own feet and landed face first on a plush ivory carpet, which probably saved her from a broken nose. And then Vi just sighed, or maybe she groaned. Whatever it was, she hoped that unlike her fall, since there was no hope for that, whatever sound she'd made had been somewhat graceful at least. As she stood up and tried to catch her breath, she looked around, then simply closed her eyes. In her relief over her unbroken face, Vi realized she had lost her shoe. The too big for her, good-as-new Converse from the second-hand store down the street from her apartment, sliding easily off her socked foot and landing somewhere in front of her in the vast expanse of the foyer. She said a silent prayer to whichever guardian angel of hers was on duty that day. Vi needed her wits about her. She touched her face. Her glasses seemed intact, but as she squinted and tried to fix them from their crooked position, her last cogent thought was that it must have been the wrong angel, A very amorous one, and not the sanguine one she desperately needed. All her proper musings evaporated, and only the improper ones remained. She was looking at the most beautiful woman in the world. Universe. What was bigger than a universe? Something, surely, because the woman was ethereal, and she was looking straight at Vi with the ghost of a smile on her incredible face. The early morning light landed on the chiseled, sharp features, caressing those planes and angles of cheekbone and jaw, and Vi was mesmerized by the play of shadows, hiding the familiarity of the face. But even in her flustered and embarrassed state, Vi knew this woman. Que cortese. You certainly know how to make an entrance, Cinderella. Vi had enough Italian to understand the remark. Courteous. Yes, it was quite the courtesy to fall flat on your face in front of the lady of the house. And she probably should have fixed her clothes, or her face, or put her shoe back on. Really done something other than stare. But the voice, silk over steel with a note of melancholy, was it? The voice had her enraptured. It had her imagining slaying whatever dragons were making this princess sad. Then the massive amber eyes crinkled at the corners, the beautiful crow's feet deepening, and an eyebrow rose up regally. Not a princess, then. A queen. Would genuflecting be too much? Take a picture, darling. It will last longer. Though, judging by the suspenders, you probably had several of mine on your wall growing up. The words were sarcastic, but the smile curving the wide mouth grew warmer. Vi stupidly found herself smiling back. Of course she'd be pegged as a lesbian. She'd long ago stopped pretending to be something she wasn't. But this was impressive gaydar nonetheless. And of course it would be this woman who'd be in possession of it. Chiara. The Chiara. Still, Vi didn't think she was necessarily telegraphing anything. She'd pulled back her long auburn curls and covered her freckles with makeup. Her outfit was straight enough that her father hadn't rolled his eyes at her when she'd stopped by his house earlier. She did sneak the suspenders under the blazer, so maybe. Then she remembered that she was in the presence of lesbian royalty, and figured being seen and being known was nothing unusual within these walls, which made her both terrified and brave. Never a good combination for Vi, because it led to her saying inane things. I might have. This surely proves my good taste. Silence reigned, and the smiling mouth opened just a touch in obvious shock at the brazenness, or stupidity, of the remark. Vi wanted to sink through the carpet. She was desperate enough to disappear that she'd dig her way through the marble underneath. But then the smile bloomed fully, and the silence was broken by gorgeous, deep laughter, sincere and contagious. Vi stared before averting her eyes. Of all the times to so boldly exhibit her innate clumsiness and foot-and-mouth disease, today was not the day to do it. Today was important. Her one chance to make something of herself. A chance so rare she hadn't even been sure her father would ever allow it, yet he had, and the gravity of her situation weighed heavily on her. Still, as she peeked from under her lashes, the object of her befuddlement winked at her. Vi felt the tips of her ears go pink. And then, as she sat awkwardly on the soft carpet, sinking deeper into the woolen luxury, the woman from her posters knelt down beside her, and long fingers gently encircled her ankle, sliding her foot into the runaway sneaker. Vi hyperventilated, and was fairly certain Chiara could feel the pulse hammering under her skin where the cool fingers touched her. The smug lift of the lips told her as much, and as a graceful hand offered to pull her up, Vi felt her color turn ruddy. My God, she's delicious and ridiculous. Aren't you, love? Who might you be? Belatedly, Vi realized there were other people in the room, two, in fact. The one speaking with a pronounced Irish accent was much shorter, with wild hair and wilder clothes. Was she really wearing an elaborate wife-beater? But her eyes were kind, even if Vi could tell they were laughing at her. Little devils played in them, twinkling and teasing, and Vi found herself grinning. I think this is our new summer intern, Aoife. Consider acting professionally. We don't need lawsuits. Of any kind. The word sounded ominous, and this woman was taller, statelier, and older. The severe, no-nonsense face was devoid of the mischief so easily found in the other two women who were looking at Vi. Oh, the Courtenay! Aoife made a gesture that Vi could only assume was some kind of elaborate curtsy. Vi felt like sinking through the floor from a different kind of embarrassment. Sully. Now Chiara's velvety voice had a tone of warning in it, and Vi's eyes followed the staying, long-fingered hand laid on Aoife's forearm. Vi licked her lips. Such a simple gesture, it made her envious. Not of Aoife, and not of Chiara, but of the ease to touch and be touched by another person. Miss Courtenay, welcome to Lillian House of Fashion. This is Renata Lilienfeld, the company's financial director. Renata inclined her head, but didn't offer her hand, and Vi was silently glad she hadn't stuck hers out like an overeager kid. Perfectly comfortable with the other woman's brusque manner, Chiara went on. This is Aoife Sullivan, head of production. She's in charge, so be afraid. After an awkward beat, all three women laughed. Aoife had no misgivings about pumping Vi's hand several times, the shake strong and warm. Vi unclenched her jaw. Yeah, not so much. But you're going to be with me, kiddo, so stick close. The Irish accent was strong, musical to Vi's ear. Regardless of what she says, Miss Courtenay, I'd listen, though perhaps only believe half of her stories. As she spoke, Chiara's wide amber eyes looked at her with so much playfulness. Vi swallowed nervously and wanted to tug on her non-existent tie. Was it really this hot in the foyer? I am Chiara Conti Lilienfeld, but you already know that. It's a... She seemed to be searching for a word, but when she finally spoke, Vi had gotten her confirmation that not only was the space hot, it was also small and devoid of oxygen. Pleasure to meet you. Mercy. Oh, mercy. Who's playing dirty now? Stop messing with my intern's head and take your amazing ass to the studio, love. I will see you at lunch. Before she knew it, Aoife grabbed Vi's forearm with little ceremony and dragged her towards the massive awning at the end of the hallway. Vi glimpsed Renata shaking her head at their antics as Chiara's laughter followed them all the way to the door. As they made their way through a series of doors, Vi barely kept up with Aoife. Not now, Cinderella. Let me show you around first, and then you can bombard me with all the questions you undoubtedly have. I assume the Cinderella bit will not be going away any time soon? Aoife spared her a sideways glance. You make that kind of entrance, you get a nickname. And there are only so many times I can call you kiddo before I start to feel old, kiddo. Finally, Aoife dragged her up 2 flights of stairs into what looked like a gallery that occupied the entire floor. She pushed Vi inside and turned in a circle. Welcome to my humble abode. She twirled once more, and Vi smiled. Not much humble about it. Ha! Mouthy, I like you. Aoife gave her a slap on the shoulder, and Vi almost lost her footing. Puny, though. We'll have to toughen you up some, Courtenay. Vi rubbed her shoulder and grimaced. It's Geneviève. Well, Vi. You do realize that I was given power here, kid. Which means I will not proceed to get drunk on it. Hence out nicknames from here on in, each one more demeaning than the next, all under the guise of not showing my soft and cuddly side. Aoife's eyes danced merrily, and Vi knew she was being messed with. Strangely, it felt good, like a warm hug of acceptance. Yes, because you are a mean and domineering kind of person. Voice dripping with sarcasm, she looked down at her new supervisor. I definitely like you. You speak my language. Sarcasm is underrated, Cinderella. So underrated. So is clumsiness. You got brownie points from me the moment you swan-dived across the threshold. Not Renata. She believes such things as humanity are entirely passé and everyone should be functioning like her beloved Swiss watches. But fortunately, Chiara has many a soft spot for an underdog, and a spectacular fall will always endear you to her. Vi rubbed the nape of her neck, exposed by the messy bun her hair was pulled into. I suppose asking if it was at least a graceful swan dive is pointless. Aoife laughed, and Vi found herself smiling, the sting of embarrassment dissipating. I've seen bears do smoother pirouettes. But I was wondering what kind of stuck-up rich asshole intern was being sent over to ruin my summer, and that single event dispelled that notion. What, rich stuck-up assholes don't fall on their faces?
They do, but something tells me you're not one of those. Fancy-ass niece of the King of Savoy lineage aside.
Vi rolled her eyes and shook her head.
Well, disregarding my fancy-ass family tree, I try not to be either of those things. Either rich or an asshole.
Eva's eyes narrowed for a second as she spoke, but she waved her hand at Vi not to answer, and the conversation moved on. Vi tried not to exhale her relief too loudly.
Well, enough small talk. Take a look around. You like?
There was so much pride and pleasure in the voice that Vi didn't have the heart to tell her she had no idea where she was and what was supposed to be happening. Eva's brow was already furrowing.
From the vacant expression on your face, am I to understand you have no clue what any of this is?
Vi just nodded and wrapped her arms around herself. She didn't even care how defensive she looked. Her fall and her lack of knowledge about anything that might remotely pertain to fashion aside, Vi still had no idea what she was doing here. Working for Frankie Lilienfeld was not exactly a dream, but an amazing opportunity for someone trying to establish a path for herself outside of the crushing thumb of her family. Observing some of the photo shoots alone would be invaluable for her.
You're going to tell me you have no idea how to use a sewing machine, right, kid?
Oh, swell. They were back to kid. She'd managed to disappoint people on her very first day, so what else was new? Except Aoife didn't look upset. She gave Vi one last considering look before moving farther into the massive open space flanked by columns and floor-to-ceiling windows.
This is where the magic happens. Don't let anyone, especially Our Lady of Conti upstairs, tell you differently.
Before Vi could ask anything, Aoife was in motion again.
Come on. I guess I will have to take pity on you and really show you around and explain things. Too bad I hate talking.
Aoife gave her a long look, at the end of which both of them laughed. Vi's shoulders relaxed again, despite still feeling like a total fish out of water.
So this is the in-house production studio. This is what I do. I get the designs they send from upstairs and turn them into actual things. Clothes, at times, accessories.
She ran her fingers over the silvery curves and what looked like thousands of levers and buttons of the Singer sewing machine, and it emitted a little purr. Vi jumped at the unexpected noise, and Aoife laughed.
I've got 20 years on you. Got to keep you on your toes.
They moved farther to a row of workbenches, material and clothes strewn all over them in a state of creative chaos. I could respect that.
I prefer to work alone, so this whole space is mine, but we occasionally have people from the main production building here. Yeah, you might have guessed right. Here on Saint-Honoré, we have the sort of business-facing side of the house. The flagship store is here. You saw it on your way in. I don't go in there. Once the clothes are finished, they're outside my purview.
Aoife turned on her heel and pointed up the stairs.
The financial and legal offices are on the 3rd floor. Renata reigns supreme there. She's the money whiz.
Vi nodded, though most of what Aoife was telling her sounded only vaguely intelligible. Her anxiety was getting the best of her. She could feel her hands grow numb and colder with every second. Her mentor seemed to understand she was struggling. Aoife gestured upstairs and motioned with her head for Vi to follow her.
You'll catch on. Despite that deer-in-the-headlights expression on your face right now, you really got to do something about that.
I guess my being totally ignorant might upset Miss Lilienfeld. Vi finally voiced her biggest anxiety.
I assume you mean Frankie?
Both eyebrows raised, Aoife looked at Vi, who nodded before lowering her face.
Phew, kiddo, Frankie won't care. Frankie won't even care that you're here, to be honest. Now Chiara might. About both. She's thoughtful like that.
Vi lifted her face so quickly at the name that Aoife looked blurry for a second before coming back into focus. And the eyes that fixed on Vi were knowing. But all she said was,
Frankie is of no concern to you. Come on, I'll show you.
Vi nodded again, deciding that silent agreement was the safest way to go since Aoife was already moving on and walking back towards the staircase, leading them to the floor above. This one was divided into glass cubicles, with several people working diligently on their computers or talking on the phone, snippets of their conversation in French, English, and what sounded like Chinese, reaching Vi's ears as she and Aoife passed through. Vi recognized Renata in the corner office, gesticulating gracefully as she spoke to a swankily dressed man with a luxurious mane of blonde hair seated in front of her desk. He winked at Vi from behind the glass wall as she and Aoife passed by, prompting Vi to stumble again. Aoife proceeded to flip him off and Vi gawked at her. In response, Renata threw a stern glare at Aoife and pressed a button on her desk, the glass instantly frosting over.
"Kiddo, what kind of lesbian are you? Don't pay Lance any attention. He's only teasing you anyway. He's Renata's right-hand man, great with numbers, can't dress himself to save his or his wife's life. Good thing Veronique, who's also our in-house attorney, does have a brilliant eye for clothes."
Aoife's mouth twisted like she had bitten into a lemon, and Vi wisely chose to school her features and not ask questions about whatever conflict there was between her supervisor and the fashion-forward lawyer. They walked the entire floor, with Aoife pointing at various people, chief accountant, chief something or other, Veronique, she of the good taste and even better legs, marketing. Vi valiantly tried to remember names and positions, but it appeared that Aoife had only 2 speeds, fast and faster, and Vi quickly figured out that the people she liked least got the shortest amount of her time, with her basically sprinting past their offices. So Vi chose to focus instead on the ones that got a minimum of 5 seconds of Aoife's attention.
"And that's the executive floor. May we never come here again this month."
She giggled as Vi stared back in confusion, absolutely certain she would never catch on to the myriad of details, names, and tasks being thrown at her.
"You'll get the hang of it. Since you're with me, you really won't have much business here. Steer clear of Veronique. Shysters are slippery. Renata is strict but fair, so no funny business. And that's all the wisdom I have to impart regarding the 3rd floor. Now onward, mon petit."
Both the grammar and the accent were pretty bad, and Vi bit her lip. However, it seemed Aoife had eyes in the back of her head where Vi was concerned.
Yes, I see you cringing. Lived in this country for 10 years now and haven't learned any kind of passable French. I wish I had, but that ship sailed. Lillian House is so cosmopolitan, English is a default here. Don't like the croissants here, though. When they all learn to make decent scones, then we'll talk."
"I'm partial to Belgian croissants myself." Vi raised her eyebrow in challenge when Aoife turned to her on the stairs. The stare-down lasted for a few heartbeats.
"The Belgian ones are okay, I guess. But nothing compares to scones with raspberry jam. Nothing. Cream first, then jam. I said what I said. Now come on, Miss Posh. Let's go meet Frankie."
Vi barely had time to take a deep breath as Aoife pushed open a wooden door leading into a large space that seemingly occupied the whole floor, save for a sectioned-off area in the corner, which looked like a replica of Renata's office with its glass walls. Except, unlike Renata's, these walls were already frosted.
"Yo, Frankie! The royal newbie is here!"
Aoife's voice rose, and a few seconds later the door opened, and a cross between a 50-year-old Brandy Carlyle and Katie Lang stepped out, shutting it firmly behind herself. Her attire was somewhat debonair, torn jeans and an even more massacred T-shirt adorned by a band logo that was indecipherable due to its numerous holes. Her handshake was rushed, and her smile, a touch vague, was seemingly permanent. "Hey, you're the Courtenay kid, Princess Allegra's cousin? Welcome. Welcome. How are you? How are you finding everything?" Unlike her older sister, Frankie's low voice had only a slight accent that Vi guessed was a remnant of her native Switzerland. The stream of questions was continuous, and Vi found that perhaps she didn't need to reply at all. Frankie was very content to speak. "Aoife here been showing you around? Good, good. I hope you see a lot, learn a lot, but don't touch anything, or anyone." She laughed suddenly, loud and brash, and Vi almost cringed. It wasn't all that funny, or maybe she'd missed the joke. Aoife coughed and intervened.
"Yeah, okay, Lilienfeld. I'm just showing Vi the ropes. You busy later? We had to discuss some of the spring trends. Chiara said—"
"Later, Sally, later. And just run it by Chiara. She'll know. She always knows better. You think so anyway." The smile didn't waver. Instead, it turned sharp, and Aoife's eyes narrowed in what Vi was beginning to understand was a characteristic gesture. But Aoife said nothing, and Vi felt like she was intruding on an old and particularly unpleasant argument. For a second, silence reigned, and Vi could have sworn she could hear something moving behind the frosted walls of the office. Frankie followed her line of sight, and her shoulders stiffened before she smiled again, this time fake and mocking. She positioned herself in front of the door and pointed her thumb at her own chest. "Genius at work."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?